Here's the recap of the first and second season of Lost series. A plane heading from Sydney to Los Angeles suddenly crashes and breaks into several pieces in midair. The middle part falls on the shore of the island, and the survivors try to save everyone they can. At night, they hear strange loud noises coming from the forest, and see something ripping out trees from their roots. From now on, I'll call it a monster. In the morning, the main characters realize that they need to somehow send a distress signal to be found. A powerful radio was in the cockpit of an airplane that went down in the jungle nearby. Neurosurgeon Jack, ex-musician Charlie, and fugitive criminal Kate go in search of the cockpit. When they find it, they climb inside. While Charlie searches the restroom for his hidden stash of illegal substances, Jack and Kate find a radio. They learn from the seriously injured pilot that earlier their plane went off course. They flew in the wrong direction for several hours because of the loss of communication. Therefore, no one will simply find them. Suddenly, the monster reappears and kills the pilot. But the rest of the main characters manage to escape. One of the survivors, a USA Marshal, is seriously wounded, and Jack tries to help him. From him, he learns that Kate is not who she says she is, and is actually a criminal. However, Jack is not going to do anything with this information as he is attracted to Kate, and the Marshal ends up dying from his wounds. Meanwhile, the main characters try to contact someone on the radio, but the signal does not pass. Syed, being a military man, realizes that they need to climb higher and heads deep into the jungle with a group of other survivors. Along the way, they are attacked by a polar bear, and Sawyer kills it with a gun he found in the Marshal's stuff. Soon they reach high ground and turn on the radio. However, they can't contact anyone because of the constant signal, which is looped and coming from somewhere on the island. It is in French, and a woman named Shannon translates it. In it, some French woman reports that she is alone on the island, and something has killed everyone else. Syed figures out that the signal's been playing already for 16 years. Before the crash, John Locke worked as an ordinary manager and was unable to walk, but had always dreamed of traveling around Australia. When Locke regains consciousness on the beach, he realizes that he can walk again. He begins to think that their appearance on the island is fate. Soon the survivors run out of food and Locke goes hunting, as he has been interested in such things all his life. In the jungle he meets the same monster, but the unknown enemy does not attack him, because of which the man becomes even more convinced of the peculiarity of this island. However, when he returns from the hunt, he does not tell anyone about what he saw. Jack begins to see hallucinations of his dead father. It turns out that in the past, the man went to Australia because he learned that his father had died from excessive alcohol consumption. Jack loaded the coffin with the body onto an airplane, but was unable to find it on the island. The hallucinations grow stronger, and Jack thinks he is going mad, but Locke advises him to give in to them, as he thinks the island has something to tell him. Just then, the survivors run out of fresh water and no one knows what to do. Soon, Jack, following the hallucinations, finds caves where there is a spring. There, he also discovers a coffin, but it turns out to be empty. Jack returns to the beach and informs everyone that they have a difficult decision to make. Maybe help will never arrive, so to survive, they will have to go to the caves where there is water, and it is easier to defend themselves against wild boars and the intense heat. Some people agree to move to the caves, but some stay on the beach to keep a fire going for rescuers who might see them. In the past, a married couple from Korea had relationship difficulties because Jin worked for his wife Soon's father and did dirty work for him. The woman wanted to run away from her husband, but changed her mind at the last moment and boarded a plane with him. On the island, they have trouble communicating with other survivors as they don't know English, but it turns out Sun actually studied the language behind her husband's back and is now keeping it a secret. One day, Jin attacks one survivor named Michael, but no one can figure out what happened between them. Sun has to tell Michael her secret, and she reveals that her husband attacked him because he thought he stole his watch. Actually, Michael just found it in some stuff and thought it didn't belong to anyone. Jin is handcuffed due to his aggressiveness, but Michael eventually frees him. A group of survivors begin to settle in the caves, and the main characters discover two very old corpses there. A man and a woman, as well as a bag with two stones, white and black. Their identities will be revealed to us only in the 6th season. Meanwhile, Charlie continues to use the illegal substances he took from the airplane, and John Locke finds out about it. He offers the guy to quit, and in return, he'll give him the guitar he recently found. Charlie really misses music, so he agrees. Except that soon he goes into withdrawal and begs Locke to give him his powder. However, in the end, Charlie manages to overcome his addiction. Said, being a former military officer, is a technical expert and wants to find out where the French woman's signal is being transmitted from. He decides to place the 3 antennas he has assembled at a distance from each other, and in this way find out where the transmission is taking place. All this has to be done at the same time, so he asks for help from the other main characters. However, at the most crucial moment, someone knocks Sid out, breaks the equipment, and prevents him from finding out where the signal is coming from. Sawyer was a scammer in the past and earned money by deceiving gullible people. It turns out that when he was a child, his parents were scammed by the same type, which caused his father to kill his mother, and then himself. Sawyer spent his whole life looking for this swindler, and did not notice how he became the one he hated the most. The man's name is actually different, and Sawyer is a nickname. On the island, he decided to take advantage of the situation and grabbed a large amount of useful items from things he found in the wrecked airplane. These items he traded from the survivors for various favors and food. One day, Shannon has an asthma attack, and her half-brother Boone tried to find an inhaler in Sawyer's stuff, for which he was beaten up. Jack and Sayid realize that a woman's life depends on this medicine, so they have no choice but to torture Sawyer. Turns out he really doesn't have an inhaler. However, the woman is helped by Sun, who uses various herbs to ease Shannon's suffering. Sayid, ashamed of torturing Sawyer, decides to leave the camp for a while and explore the island alone. We're shown his background. The man was a communications officer in the Iraqi army and was in love with a woman his superiors wanted to execute. Sayid managed to save her, and after a while his base is captured by the American military. After that, Sayid starts working for the CIA and deals with torture. When he finished his service, he found out about where exactly his beloved was and went to her, but during the flight he crashed and ended up on an island. In the present day, Sayid is walking along the beach and finds a cable that runs from the water to the depths of the island. He follows it and gets trapped. Sayid wakes up tied up, and some woman demands him to tell her where her daughter Alex is. The man doesn't understand what's going on, and eventually guesses that it's the same French woman whose distress signal has been playing for 16 years. Her name is Danielle Rousseau, and she's a bit of a cuckoo. She was part of a scientific team that was shipwrecked on this island. Then they started dying of an unknown disease. She also talks about the other people on the island, which she calls the others. They are the ones who kidnapped her daughter. Sayid doesn't really believe the crazy Rousseau and ends up running away, taking her map with her notes. However, on the way back, Sayid hears mysterious whispers coming from the forest and begins to suspect that the others actually exist. A young woman named Claire got pregnant by a guy who soon left her. She was afraid that she couldn't cope alone and thought of giving the child up for adoption. One day, Claire comes to a psychic, and he behaves very strangely, as if he really knows where she will end up in the future. First, he begs her to keep the baby, and then he gives her money and persuades her to go to Los Angeles, where she can give the baby to a good family, but the plane crashes and Claire finds herself on an island. Nowadays, she has ominous dreams for several days in a row. She believes that someone wants to harm her baby, but the others don't believe her. During the 2 weeks she has been here, Claire has become close to Charlie, but he doesn't really believe the impressionable pregnant woman either. Because of everything that happened earlier, a guy named Hurley decides to make a list of survivors to see who is who in general, so he interviews all the people around him. Soon he checks his list against the airplane's passenger list and discovers that one man named Ethan didn't fly with them. Just at this time, Claire becomes sick, and Charlie rushes to get a doctor but stumbles upon Ethan. the man kidnaps the couple and takes them somewhere in the jungle. Meanwhile, Kate and Jack meet Syed, who tells them about the so-called others, and Hurley adds to all this with what he learned while making a list of survivors. Several of the main characters run into the jungle to find Charlie and Claire. They have to split up, and Jack meets Ethan, who advises him not to pursue them or someone will get hurt. Jack doesn't listen to him, and Ethan beats up the doctor. After that, the main characters stumble upon the hanged Charlie. However, Jack manages to save him. Locke and Boone are still looking for Claire, but soon it starts to get dark. Boone drops his flashlight, which hits something metal. The main characters dig up the ground and discover a hatch to the bunker. Locke decides not to tell anyone about what they found. Over the course of several episodes, the man tries to figure out how to get inside, remembering his past. Years ago, his father, whom he had never met before, contacted him. In a short time, they become close, but eventually it turns out that his father used him to get a kidney from him. After the surgery, the old man cuts all ties with his son, and Locke feels cheated. Throughout the series, we are repeatedly shown how gullible and easily influenced this character is. Sawyer and Kate grow close and begin to have feelings for each other. Soon they find the suitcase of the very marshal from the airplane. However, the woman does not want anyone to know what exactly is inside. Sawyer and Kate unsuccessfully attempt to open the case, but Jack eventually succeeds. Inside, they discover several guns, as well as an envelope, which Kate takes. There turns out to be a toy airplane that belonged to her lover. From the flashbacks, we learn that he died because of Kate. While Boone and Locke try to figure out how to open the hatch to the bunker, Syed asks Shannon to help him translate Rousseau's notes on the maps he stole from her. The translation goes nowhere, but a romantic relationship begins between Syed and Shannon. Soon, Locke gives Syed a compass, and he discovers that north is not actually where the arrow is pointing. However, the main characters cannot find any reasonable explanation for this. Suddenly, Claire emerges from the jungle. It turns out she doesn't remember anything from the moment she got on the plane. Charlie is upset as she has no memory of their relationship either. In the morning, Ethan shows up and demands that they give Claire back, or he will kill them one by one. What the man actually does the next day. The main characters decide to use the weapon from the case and set a trap for Ethan. They use Claire as bait and eventually they catch the man. Jack wants to interrogate him, however Charlie shows up and kills Ethan for everything he did earlier. We're shown Michael's past. It turns out that after his divorce, his wife took his son Walt and went to Australia with him. A few years later, the woman dies, and her current husband contacts Michael. It turns out he doesn't want to keep Walt, as the boy is very strange and, when he's around, something is always happening. Michael goes to Australia. He takes his own son and flies to Los Angeles, but crashes on the way. On the island, Michael tries to establish a relationship with Walt, but nothing comes out. However, the man does not intend to sit idly by and decides to build a raft to get off the island. Meanwhile, Jin learns that Sun knows English and that his wife has wanted to leave him in the past. Jin realizes that he is to blame for all of this. So he leaves Sun in shame and helps Michael build a raft to save his wife. We're shown Hurley's past. It turns out that he was treated in a mental institution, and there met a man who was always saying the same numbers: 4, 8, 15, 16, 23, and 42. When Hurley got out of the asylum, he decided to play the lottery. By betting on these numbers, he won $114 million. However, after that, strange events began to happen around him. Although nothing happened to him personally, there were incidents around him that could be described as unfortunate. And eventually he ended up on an island. Now the guy believes that the numbers are cursed, and it was because of him that the plane crashed. Soon he discovers the same numbers on a French woman Rousseau's map and goes in search of her to find out what they mean. Hurley eventually finds her, and she tells the following story. It turns out there was originally a signal coming from the island that played these numbers non-stop. Their ship was wrecked when they tried to find out where the message was coming from. Her crew later found a radio tower where they contracted an unknown disease. Rousseau later replaced this signal with the one the main characters heard. Frenchwoman agrees with Hurley that numbers really can be cursed. The guy is glad he is not crazy, but he does not yet know that the same numbers are engraved on the very bunker that Locke and Boone are slowly digging up. Boone's patience begins to wear thin as they can't find a way to open the hatch, but Locke assures him that the island will tell them the way. Soon the man has a strange dream and realizes that they need to find a plane in the jungle. They finds it hanging on a cliff. Boone climbs up, and inside he discovers Virgin Mary figurines filled with illegal substances. The plane was a smuggler's transport. Boone tries to radio someone and even gets a response, but suddenly the plane goes down. Locke retrieves the mortally wounded guy and carries him back to camp on his back. However, it's too late, and Boone ends up dead. Locke returns to the bunker and knocks on the hatch in desperation as suddenly a bright light bursts out of his window. The main characters think that it was Locke who killed Boone, and Sayid tries to find out all the details of his death. Together with Locke, he goes to the crashed airplane, and it turns out that the old man is not lying. However, Sayid learns that it was Locke who hit him on the head when he was installing antennas to find the source of the Frenchwoman's signal. Locke says that he saved them all that way, since they soon find out that that's where Rousseau's team got infected with something. Sayid asks to take him and Jack to the hatch, as they heard about it from Boone before his death. Locke takes them there, and they agree that the bunker needs to be opened somehow. Claire goes into labor. She doesn't make it to the caves in time and gives birth right in the jungle. However, the baby is fine. A few days later, Rousseau appears on the beach and tells everyone that they are in danger because of the black smoke on the horizon. It turns out the same thing happened to their group. After the smoke appeared, the others came and took her daughter Alex, so she wants to help protect Claire's baby. The main characters realize that they urgently need to open a bunker to have at least some shelter from the others. Rousseau tells them where they can find the explosives, and several people go to get them. On the way, they are attacked again by the same monster from earlier in the season, and Rousseau tells them that it's a kind of defense system for the island. A little later, we see what it is. It's just black smoke, which nevertheless can grab its victims. The main characters manage to escape from the smoke, and soon they reach an old wooden ship, which is located deep in the jungle. Rousseau leaves them, and the main characters try to carefully retrieve dynamite from there. One of the survivors dies because of this, and the others carefully carry the explosives back. Meanwhile, Rousseau gets to the beach and kidnaps Claire's baby. The rest of the main characters follow her, and on the way, Charlie stumbles upon the very airplane filled with illegal substances. Soon, Sayid and Charlie get to the place where the black smoke was coming from, and find Rousseau and the baby there. We learn that a desperate woman kidnapped the baby to try to trade it for her daughter Alex, who was taken by the others years ago. Turns out she heard them whispering in the jungle about taking the boy. However, no one ever came. Rousseau gives up the baby, and the main characters return him to Claire. At this time, Michael, Walt, Jin, and Sawyer launch their ship and set out on their journey. Soon they turn on the radar and discover a ship nearby. They fire a flare, and a few minutes later, a boat arrives. However, these are not rescuers. They call the main characters by name and, threatening them with guns, demand that they give them the boy. They eventually take Walt away. The main character's ship is blown up, and Jin, Michael, and an injured Sawyer end up in the water. Meanwhile, Locke, Jack, Hurley, and Kate make it to the bunker and plant the explosives. Suddenly, Hurley notices the numbers on the wall of the bunker and yells for the main characters to stop. However, it is too late. After the explosion, they look inside and see a narrow passage with a broken ladder at the very top. This is the end of the first season. Let's pause for a moment. Here you can like this video, subscribe to my channel, and write some comments. Thanks. The main characters argue about whether they should go down into the bunker, and at first split up to think things over. Soon, Locke and Kate return with a rope. When the woman goes down, a bright light comes on and she disappears somewhere. After which, Locke decides to go after her, Inside, he discovers a rather large bunker with a symbol in the form of a swan and the name Dharma. Then a man named Desmond points a gun at him. At first, he thinks he's been sent a replacement, but when he asks Locke for the password and he doesn't answer, Desmond begins to think of them as his enemies. After a while, Jack returns to the bunker and also goes down. There, he discovers a dome-shaped room with equipment. Suddenly, Locke appears, held at gunpoint by a man, and Jack recognizes him as someone he saw a few years ago. Back when he was in Los Angeles, he performed a very difficult surgery on a woman who later became his wife. Jack agonized that he might fail as there was almost no chance of success. He went to the stadium to clear his head, and there he met Desmond, who was also running there like him. The men chatted and Desmond encouraged Jack with his words, after which the operation was a success. Desmond holds the main characters at gunpoint and learns that they survived a plane crash on the island. Suddenly, a freed Kate appears and knocks the man down. This causes Desmond to pull the trigger, and the bullet hits the computer. He claims the whole world will die if they don't fix it. While Kate runs after Syed through the emergency exit, Desmond tells them what's going on here. He, like the main characters, ended up on the island by accident when he got caught in a storm on his boat 3 years ago. He was rescued by a man who very convincingly explained to him that every 108 minutes you have to enter certain numbers into the computer. By the way, these are the same numbers from the previous season. The main characters don't believe him at first, but he gives them a tape where a scientist tells them that this bunker called Swan was built as a research station. However, due to some incident, there is now a buildup of electromagnetic energy that needs to be dumped every 108 minutes. If this is not done, the end of the world will happen. Soon Desmond starts to freak out and thinks that they won't be able to press the button, so he runs away into the jungle wishing the main characters good luck. Syed comes to the bunker and manages to fix the computer. At the last moment, Jack enters the combination and the countdown resets. After that, the main characters start to be on duty in the bunker and press the button every 108 minutes. Let's go back in time a little bit. After the main character's boat is blown up at the end of the previous season, the men find themselves in the water. However, Jin has disappeared somewhere. Mike and the wounded Sawyer drift on the wreckage for a while and find themselves near the island again. Once ashore, they see Jin running, shouting the word "others." Then a group of people appear, and they knock out the main characters. They are dumped into a cage pit, and strangers try to find out who they are. After they reveal that they are survivors of a plane crash, they are released. It turns out these unknowns are also survivors, except from the tail section that went down on the other side of the island. Their leader, Ana Lucia, doesn't behave very friendly, and takes the main characters to an abandoned Dharma station called Arrow. There, a woman named Libby tells them what happened to them. It turns out that originally there were 23 of them, but the first night the others showed up and kidnapped 3 of them, and after a while, a few more, including children. The main characters manage to kill one of the kidnappers and find his list of names, that is, those whom they were supposed to take. Ana Lucia realizes that there is a spy among them and begins to suspect one guy. She puts him in a pit and plans to torture him. Except the traitor turns out to be another man, named Goodwin. He kills the guy in the pit and makes it look like he escaped so he won't be discovered. However, Ana Lucia guesses he's the spy. Goodwin assures her that the kidnapped people are okay since they are on the good list, but the others are bad. The couple fights, and Ana Lucia kills Goodwin. After a while, the survivors find Jin on the shore and tie him up. He manages to escape, and we know what happened next. In the present time, Michael decides to go in search of his son and gets separated from the group. Jin and Mr. Echo follow him to convince him to return. Soon, Mr. Echo orders them to hide, and they see a group of men in rags walk past them completely silently. They eventually find Michael and convince him to return. Meanwhile, Sawyer becomes ill from an injury he received on the ship. At first, the group wants to abandon him, but Michael convinces them to carry him to the camp where he can be helped by a doctor named Jack. On the way, one woman is kidnapped by the others, and Ana Lucia retrieves the gun she took from Sawyer. Meanwhile, On the other side of the island, Shannon sees Walt in the woods and tells everyone else, but no one believes her. Not even Saeed, with whom she is in a relationship. Eventually, the man decides to believe her after all and goes with her to search for the boy. Suddenly, they both hear whispers and see Walt. Shannon then runs off after him alone. Suddenly, a gunshot rings out and Saeed finds Shannon dead, but it was Ana Lucia who killed her, having mistaken the woman for one of the others. Everyone starts blaming each other as Shannon is dead, even though it was a tragic accident. Eventually, however, things are settled, and the second group joins the survivors on the beach. Only Ana Lucia feels like an outcast, as everyone now distrusts her. By the way, the woman worked for the police before the crash and was almost killed in the line of duty. After that, she withdrew into herself, started drinking, and became more aggressive. Meanwhile, Bernard from the second group of survivors is reunited with his wife Rose from the first group, and Sawyer manages to get medical help in time and comes to his senses. One day, it is Michael's turn to sit at the computer. Suddenly, a beep sounds and a greeting pops up on the screen. Michael answers and then receives a message letting him know that it is his kidnapped son, Walt. He secretly communicates with him for a while, and Walt asks him to go alone to the specified location. Michael retrieves a rifle from the bunker's armory and goes after his son. The rest of the main characters follow him to convince him to return, but soon meet the bearded boat captain who kidnapped Walt in Season 1. He says that the main characters are surrounded and informs them that there is now a border that they are not allowed to cross, or they will all be killed. We are told the story of Mr. Echo. He was born in Nigeria, and to protect his brother, he joined the bandits. Years later, his brother becomes a priest, and Mr. Echo becomes a bloodthirsty bandit leader. One day, he decides to send a large batch of illegal substances on an airplane under the cover of church documents and put them in statuettes of the Virgin Mary. Everything does not go according to plan. His brother is accidentally killed and the plane flies away with his body. After that, it disappears somewhere, and Mr. Echo stays and becomes a priest. Now he learns that Charlie carries with him a statue of the Virgin Mary and demands that he shows where exactly he found it. Moreover, he breaks the statue, and Claire sees illegal substances there. Charlie agrees to take him to the downed plane, and on the way they encounter black smoke, which this time we can see more clearly. However, the smoke does nothing to them. Eventually, Charlie leads him to the plane, and Mr. Echo finds his dead brother. Claire doesn't want to be around Charlie because he's a drug addict. The guy swears that he hasn't used anything for a long time, but Claire doesn't believe him. And we see that Charlie has a big stash of several statues of the Virgin Mary. One day he has a dream in which Claire's baby is in danger, and when he wakes up he finds himself standing by the water holding him. Later, after talking to Mr. Echo, Charlie begins to believe that the baby should be baptized so that nothing can happen to it, but makes things worse, which causes Locke to beat him up when he tries to kidnap the baby. Also, the old man finds his stash of statues and takes them, and at the end of the episode, Claire herself asks Mr. Echo to baptize the baby. Some survivors think they need to train people to stand up to the others, but some characters don't want to create an army. Just then, someone tries to kidnap Sun, and the group begins to disagree on where the weapons should be. However, in the end, Sawyer sets things up so that he can take all the guns for himself and declare himself the new sheriff. He did this because no one wanted to give him back his stuff, which had been taken apart while he was on the boat. It turns out that Sawyer put Charlie up to kidnapping Sun because Charlie wanted to make things unpleasant for Locke. Nevertheless, the weapon is eventually returned to the bunker. I won't focus on that since it doesn't really matter how it happened. Sayid meets Rousseau in the jungle, and she asks him to follow her. The woman leads him to a stranger hanging in her trap and claims he is one of the others. Sayid returns with him to the bunker, and they lock him in a storage room. Soon Sayid begins to torture him, and the man reveals that his name is Henry, and he got here in a hot air balloon with his wife a few weeks ago. His wife died of some disease, and he buried her under the wreckage of the balloon. Henry sounds very convincing, so some of the main characters start to believe him. However, Syed has his doubts and decides to check out his story. With other survivors, he goes to the crash site and even finds the grave. In the bunker, the main characters find quite a lot of food. Hurley is assigned to make sure that no one takes too much and distributes everything equally. However, the guy realizes that the food will not last long, and eventually everyone will hate him, so he immediately gives away all the leftovers. After a while, sympathy develops between him and Libby. The woman claims to be a psychologist, but in fact, she was in the same mental hospital as Hurley. Turns out he was there because of schizophrenia. An imaginary personality convinced him that eating too much was normal, but he eventually got over it. When the survivors found the bunker on the island and the food in it, Hurley started to overeat again. But Libby encouraged him. He started eating normally and got rid of his stash of high-calorie food. However, soon an entire pallet of food from Dharma is dropped from the sky. Let's also immediately go over more notable flashbacks of the main characters. We finally learn exactly what Kate did before the crash. It turns out she killed her stepfather, who was beating up her mother. However, her mom couldn't forgive her for that. Syed was serving in Iraq and his military base was overrun by American soldiers. He learns that his commander in the past ordered the elimination of an entire village with civilians. Syed then begins working for the CIA and engages in torture. Before the disaster, Sun and Jin tried to have a child, but it turned out that the man was infertile. And when the relationship with her husband became quite bad, Sun began to cheat on him. On the island, she finds out that she is pregnant and fears that the child is not Jin's, but her lover's. However, she tells her husband that she is expecting a child. Before the crash, Rose was terminally ill with cancer, but when she got to the island, she felt normal. Her husband Bernard at first tried to find some way to leave the place, but when he learned that his wife was better, he agreed to stay with her until the end. Claire's baby gets a rash. Suddenly, Rousseau arrives and informs her that he is infected with something. Soon, Claire begins to remember the events of her abduction in the previous season. It turns out she was brought to some bunker where she was injected with a medication that caused her mind to be confused. The doctors were friendly, including Ethan. For a while, they prepared her for labor, but soon a young woman named Alex showed up and helped Claire out of the bunker. She began to resist, as due to the medicine, she didn't realize the danger she was in if she stayed. Rousseau appeared, knocked her out, and dragged her to the survivors' camp, where she was found. In the present, Claire realizes that she needs to find the vaccine, which was injected by doctors in the bunker, and together with Rousseau and Kate goes there. However, the station has already been abandoned, and by the way, its symbol is the caduceus. The women don't find the vaccine and go back, and Kate discovers a drawer containing dirty clothes, false beards, and makeup that the others use to transform themselves into wild men. Meanwhile, Charlie finds the vaccine Claire was looking for and gives it to her. After that, the relationship between the two begins to mend. Charlie also finally destroys all the Virgin Mary figurines by throwing them into the ocean. While Syed and the other survivors try to confirm Henry's story about the balloon crash, the captive manipulates Jack and Locke, turning them against each other. One day, Locke hears strange static coming from the bunker's speakers, and suddenly the alarm sounds. The blast doors then close, leaving the main characters on the other side of the computer, and a button needs to be pressed in the next few minutes. Locke frees Henry, opens the doors with a tire iron and tries to climb through. However, his legs get pinned down. Then he asks Henry to climb through the vent and press the button, which he does at the very last moment. While Locke lies crushed, a fluorescent lamp comes on and displays a map with the other Dharma stations. After that, everything goes back to normal, and the main characters can't achieve such an effect anymore. Just at this time, Syed returns with the other survivors. They tell that Henry's story is confirmed, and they found the grave right under the balloon, just as he said. However, that wasn't enough for Syed, and after digging it up, they find the real Henry's papers, which means the man in front of them is indeed one of the others. They interrogate him again, but the man claims he will be killed if he talks. He also provokes Locke by assuring him that the bunker is just a joke, and nothing really happens if you don't push the button. Ana Lucia interrogates Henry, but he suddenly attacks her and nearly kills the woman. Locke manages to save her in time. In the past, when Ana Lucia worked for the police and was almost killed while on duty, she found the shooter and killed him herself. On the island, a woman also wants revenge on Henry for the attack. She seduces Sawyer and steals his gun. Meanwhile, Jack thinks they can trade Henry for Walt, and together with Kate go to the border marked by the others. However, when they get there, an exhausted Michael runs out of the woods. Together they go back, and when the man regains consciousness, he tells them that he has tracked down the others. There are not many of them, and they live much worse than the group of survivors. Michael suggests that they go to them in a small group and free Walt. When everyone leaves the bunker, Michael is alone. Ana Lucia shows up and tells him that she didn't dare kill Henry. Michael offers his help in doing so. However, when Ana Lucia gives him the gun, he kills her and also Libby, who has appeared as she was a witness. He then opens the back room, frees Henry, and shoots himself in the arm. He makes it look like Henry killed the women, wounded him, and then escaped. Locke tries to remember the map he saw on the blast door, but he cannot reproduce it. At this time, Mr. Eko has a vision and realizes that he must help Locke in his search, specifically to find a certain question mark. Together, they go to the fallen airplane, and when Eko climbs up and looks down from the cliff, he sees that very question mark. They push the fallen airplane away and find the entrance to yet another bunker. It turns out to be a tracking station called the Pearl. This is where the chairs and monitors are located. On one of them, they see their bunker. The main characters discover another tape, where the same scientist tells what exactly a person should do at this station. According to him, the rest of the people in the bunkers are subjected to a psychological experiment, and the operator's task is to note all the oddities in their behavior and other unusual phenomena. Then to write it all down in a log, and when it is finished, to send it by pneumatic mail. Locke gets angry and refuses to press the button anymore, believing the scientist on the tape. However, Mr. Eko, on the contrary, thinks it's very important, and now he starts watching the numbers being entered into the computer. Suddenly, on the beach, the main characters see a boat in the distance and make their way onto it, where they meet a drunk Desmond. We finally learn his story. Back in the past, the man was kicked out of the army and was ashamed to return to his lover named Penny. And her father, Charles Widmore, a very powerful man, didn't want such a coward getting close to his daughter. So Desmond decides to prove he's worth something. He takes part in a sailing race around the world, but ends up getting caught in a storm. He is rescued by a man in a hazmat suit and dragged to the bunker. Kelvin tells him what he is doing here, and they take turns at the button for 3 years. Desmond is strictly forbidden to go out, as there is a dangerous virus on the island that can kill them all. Kelvin also tells him that if everything goes wrong, there is a special fuse, but it is unknown what will happen if they turn this key. Desmond soon learns that Kelvin has been lying to him, and there is no virus, and the man has been secretly repairing his boat all this time to escape the island, leaving Desmond to push the button. The men start fighting, and Desmond accidentally kills Kelvin. He presses the button for a while, but begins to go cuckoo and even decides to end his life. However, he suddenly hears a knock on the lid of the bunker and realizes that not all is lost. By the way, it was Locke who knocked when Boone died in the previous season. In the present tense, Desmond tells us that he could not leave the island. Every time he sailed away from it, he found himself back on its shores. We find out exactly what happened to Michael when he went to Walt's earlier. Along the way, he is caught by others and brought to their camp where they live like savages, but guard some door to another bunker. Soon a woman comes to him and starts asking various questions about his son Walt, and then offers him a deal. If he will free Henry and also bring Jack, Kate, Sawyer, and Hurley to them, they will then release him and Walt, and also give them a boat to get off the island. Michael is given 3 minutes to talk to his son, and the man agrees to the deal. In the present, Michael argues with the rest of the main characters and convinces them that only certain people should go along with him to free Walt. Syed finds this odd and shares his thoughts with Jack. Then they guess that Michael is probably trying to lead them into a trap. So the main characters decide to be on the safe side, and while Michael's group goes to the specified place, Saeed, along with Jin and Sun, swim there on a boat. The plan is for them to catch the others off guard and light a signal fire for the rest of the main characters. Along the way, Saeed notices the wreckage of an incredibly huge statue on the rocks and realizes that it has 4 toes on its foot for some reason. They soon swim to the designated spot, and Saeed makes his way to the others' camp, but realizes that it's a sham, and even the entrance to the bunker isn't real. Michael's group goes to the designated point, but along the way, Sawyer spots the others and kills one of them. Jack has to tell everyone that Michael is leading them into a trap. The man then confesses to everything, including that he killed Ana Lucia and Libby. It turns out Michael was leading them to a completely different place, and along the way they found a pneumatic tube and a huge amount of filled-out logs from the Pearl Station. Suddenly they are put to sleep with special darts. They regain consciousness on the dock, bound and gagged. It turns out the others are led by none other than Henry. Suddenly the sky over the island begins to glow with a bright white light, and all the people cover their ears against the rumbling sound. Let's go back in time a little bit. Mr. Echo keeps pressing the button, but Locke is determined to stop him and bring the countdown to 0, as he is sure that nothing will happen. He convinces Desmond to do so, and together they manage to activate the blast doors, leaving Mr. Echo outside the room with the computer. The couple sits and waits for the timer to go to 0, but then Desmond learns that the main character's plane went down at the exact moment when he failed to press the button a few weeks ago, and the computer started giving an error. Eventually he entered the combination and everything normalized. Now Desmond doubts that nothing will happen if he doesn't press the button, but Locke reassures him. When the dial reaches 0, we see strange symbols instead of numbers, and everything starts to collapse. Metal objects are magnetized to the walls of the bunker. Desmond and Locke realize they've made a mistake. There's nothing left to do but use the fuse key. Desmond turns it, after which the bright light over the island disappears, and what happened to the bunker we will never know this season. Meanwhile on the dock, everyone is recovering, and Henry gives Michael back his son Walt. He gives them a boat and tells them the direction by which they can leave the island. Henry then lets Hurley go. He asks him to go back to camp and inform the other main characters to stay away from that part of the island, and Kate, Sawyer, and Jack are taken away. In the final frames of the episode, we see at what polar station the 2 men get the message, "Electromagnetic anomaly detected." They then call Penny, Desmond's girlfriend, and tell her that they may have found what they were looking for. This is the end of the 2nd season. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and click the like button. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.